Welcome to the Lift Your Story podcast with guest Jonathan Culliton.
Here we go.
Hi, everyone. I am LaurieAnn. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I am with.
I am Roy Miller. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and we would like to welcome you to our Lift Your Story podcast.
So in this episode, we have Jonathan Culliton, and he is a trans writer and director. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi guys, sorry about my computer shaking this early. My cat just needed to use it to jump up on a shelf, and he's good now.
No problem. No problem.
It's not your computer having anxieties. We're okay then.
I mean, he's pretty stuck up there now too. Where are you gonna go, bud? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this ends up. Hi guys, how are you doing? It's nice to talk to you today.
Well, thank you. So tell us a little bit about the work you've done as a
producer, a writer, a director, a filmmaker. So yeah, basically, I have been, working in Los Angeles for the past decade. And when you sort of land here as a writer, you're kind of looking to just make connections and do set work. I think for me personally, I thought that I didn't really want to align myself exclusively with trans creatives and queer creatives because I thought it was sort of the cheap way to do it almost. I wanted to do it on my own. And what I realized is that nobody does that. Everybody has a transness, that they're, whether it's their ethnicity, whether it's the kind of stories they want to tell, they find their people somehow. So it took me a minute to realize that that was going to be my most beneficial course of action. So once I started working in what we call inclusive crews, it really is without being something that discriminates against people who are not in those groups, because that is illegal. You can't say you gotta be this and we're gonna hire you. We just promote basically anybody, BIPOC, queer people, differently abled people, anybody who's underrepresented, because the film industry is still exceedingly white, cisgendered, and heterosexual. So I started working with crews that came under that category. And what I found there was the people that I was supposed to be with, the people that were going to promote my work, that were going to be interested. And as you guys might know, queer people, even in our vernacular with each other, we actually, like, if you watch RuPaul's Drag Race and you notice like all this, the tea, no shade, all of that stuff is club language that was developed by queer people in the 70s and 80s. And we're still using it. I will go on set, meet a 19-year-old queer kid who's doing the production design or something, and we're talking that language. So that's another thing that I found was, oh yeah, like we're all each other's people. There's of course discrimination within the LGBTQ community that's a problem. But for the most part, when we're talking about creatives, which film sets are such a family. When you're marrying a queer family and a film family, that really is the people that understand your language enough to help you attempt to translate it for everybody. So right now, as I stand, like, I'm a writer director that's been produced and distributed with queer content, but I also work as a first AD on queer sets for usually queer artists or queer directors and queer DPs. And that's really where I find it most rewarding. I don't know how to really describe it totally to cis-het people, but it's just like coming home. There's not an anxiety of, is this going to be okay? So that, to me as a trans person, it's the most comforting place in the world. And that's what I've been doing for the past few years.
Well, is Hollywood both inclusive and exclusive?
Yes.
There's a big line there, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of creatives that are very successful that are cis and heterosexual that have latched on to trans creatives. There's a whole group like that. There's a group of people who only exclusively can work in queer content when it's particularly tokenized. So that's really a money grab thing. Oh, we need the trans character because our show doesn't have one. Or even being like, we have the first Asian non-binary character or something. That's not built from a good place. So they're doing what they do. And I respect the money aspect of it because I understand that what I do requires thousands upon thousands of dollars every single day to pay people and insure equipment and have equipment there. Like, that's just the game. You know, it just costs that much. So I'm willing to play the money game, but there are a lot of people who are sort of faux progressed in Hollywood, and there's some people that straight up don't want us here, and think that having more than 2 trans characters on a television show is bombarding the audience with dogma, and it's not, because me walking down the street is not bombarding strangers with my dogma. I exist, you know, so we're just really trying to get that level of reflection of the world. Why is it a through line to not like something? It bothers you, okay. I know a lot of cis men, particularly, get bothered by me because I am a man, but I don't have their equipment. And how did I get into that club without their equipment? You've got to have this equipment, right? That's the membership card, if you will. And that's crazy. That's wild. Everybody has different bodies. People don't really understand that there's a huge wide spectrum of biology and physiology. So if you're just taking it like that, then the whole thing really falls apart. And why should you not like something and want to, why would you go on a comment even and say, hey, I saw your really joyful video about celebrating your transitional steps, and I just thought I'd like to remind you that you're not actually who you say you are, and this is what I believe, and most people believe this, so I'm just going to just tear you down on your little personal platform space, and I hope that your self-confidence is wrecked. That is not good for human beings. There's a lot of people like that. A lot of people are spending a lot of time doing that to trans people, and it's not just you know, people on the street, people on the Instagram. It's Laverne Cox, you know, it's Janet Mock. You look at the comments, and I usually don't now, but there's not a post that they've done, any trans famous person has done, that does not include a comment like that. So this is sort of like the environment that we just live around and deal with every day. And you know, they do liken being like in the closet to solitary confinement in terms of mental, what happens to you. And I do think that this is similar. This is like being taunted every day. And sometimes I feel very anxious about it because I don't want to deal with that today. But just like people of color, you know, in certain spaces, there's no choice. We're open season sometimes in certain spaces.
You have to wonder about the people who just troll around and do that sort of thing. I mean, seriously, I think that's, you know, it almost reminds me of a patent place on you know, on social media. Let's go find something to discern. And I really have to say, because I mean, I've seen these things not just on, you know, trans sites, but on other sites of different people, that there, you know, there has to be that comment. You can write something innocent and someone's got to come in and write a nasty comment. And ultimately, it's easier said than done, but you just got to say, you know, you are on social media, it's going to happen, and you've got to see where it's coming from. Usually those people are not happy with themselves, or something that they're arguing within themselves, the conflict within themselves, I believe. I mean, I look at people, I go, oh my goodness, why are they doing that? And then I realize, crap, you know why you don't like it? Because you're doing the same thing. You know, it's like a mirror of that. So
I mean, I always imagine them in their mom's basement. You know, so imagine that they're very irritated because their mom, you can't hear her, but she's yelling down the stairs saying, clean this up, do the laundry. That is what I think every time, because I know that these guys don't have a lot going on.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's like I said, it's hard to ignore, but it really is something that's required, particularly if you're going to be out there on social media. It's just like being an actor or whatever, you're going to get the beat downs.
Yeah.
But no, now I know that this is kind of a little bit silly to ask, but you are comfortable in your community, and there are some people who are out there who don't really understand. So what would CIS stand for? And I know the LGBT, there's so many of these that some of us can't grasp all of them, but just if you don't mind just educating the listeners just quickly.
Just terminology.
Yeah.
Well, cis is cisgender, and that just is a term for somebody whose gender is aligned with their body. Usually cisgender people don't think of themselves as cisgender because they plopped up into the world and here I am and I'm all set, right? But we have a word for it because society, predicated this whole thing of having these gender roles. So cisgender is just like you guys.
Does it stand for anything, or is it just a word that's come up?
I'm gonna say I don't know that. It's spelled CIS.
Okay.
So I really don't know, but in the very beginning of when it was used, I used to say, "Are you cisgender?" when I was going to date somebody, and they'd say, "I'm not a sissy." And I'd be like, okay, never mind. Never mind the whole thing. So it's definitely not in the zeitgeist yet, but that is the term, and like I said, non-binary, that's somebody who that non-binary people can identify as trans and not. They don't believe really that they're beholden to the spectrum, because they're not. The spectrum is male to female, and there's some complicated issues about, well, we're thwarting that. So are we just throwing it away? I'm a trans man. I was born female. You can see that I am a man. I'm presenting as a man because I am a man. But it's like, do I have sort of this agency now to be like, well, I'm a man with different equipment though. So like, let's throw the whole thing away. I have feminine qualities. Are you kidding? I am a disciple of Gilmore Girls. I watch that show all the time. I grew up watching it with my mother. I grew up watching it with my mom, as this is a parent and child activity, and we saw ourselves in that. It doesn't make me any less of a man. I just love that freaking show. So there's that, so there's some people that you could talk to, and I'm saying this because they might give different answers to those questions, and non-binary people have their own way of describing themselves, and I'm not non-binary. But and then we just say usually trans man and trans woman. Obviously, like trans man, actually maybe not obviously, and I'll say this in case it's not obvious to your viewers and your listeners, but when you have the word trans and then you have man or woman, a lot of people go, oh, you're a trans man. So that means that you were born a man and that you're transing. No, okay? And the way that you can tell, cis people, the way that you can tell is that trans people, for the most part, would not self-identify in a phrase like that with the gender that they do not know themselves to be. So a trans man would describe himself as a trans man because he's locking into you that he is a man. Yes, he's informing you that he is also trans, but he is a trans man. So I find a lot of people don't understand the difference between trans woman and trans man, but part of the identifying labels is a power for us, and that connects to the actual medical diagnosis for gender dysphoria, which is affirmation of gender. And that's why everybody thinks it's a little bit pie in the sky, but it is an actual mental thing that has a psychological thing that can improve it. And that's other people affirming and your own self affirming your gender.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for explaining that. And Roy, I'm sort of taking over here on asking questions. So if you have one, please do. But I was going to follow through with some of the work that you've done. But Roy, you start with.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I know that you've, you have been doing directing. So we're going to take a different. Would like to know a little bit more about that, about what you've been directing, what producing, so on.
Well, for the past 4 years, I spent a lot of time on Bombshell, the series, which is my series that's now out in distribution. It's available on Amazon, Fearless, Gay Binge, TLA, Real Women Network. I'm missing one, and it's coming out on Blu-ray later this month. So all those links, I'm sure, are going to be available if you go through to my social media. But that is something that it took that much time because this was my story. This was actually really based on my experience. The show actually breaks the fourth wall to just kind of go, hey guys, by the way, the person that's writing the thing that you're watching right now, and you're watching these kind of horrors play out for comedic, sensibilities, that's real. That's verbatim. That was actually said to me, so we intentionally designed it so that you are inescapably in a real story, but the comedy is along the lines of like American Pie, so you're having a really good time. But Roy's reaction. You like it, Roy. That took a long time because I wrote the script, and then when I was done with that, which was 7 episodes, approximately 7 minutes a pop. And after I was done with that, I was like, well, now I got to direct it. So that was a whole thing to prep, and oh, hell, I was producing it too. So there was all this stuff, and partially that was because it was my story. So I was just a control freak to the nth. I just didn't want anything to not have my eyes in front of it. So it took a really long time. And then we shot it in March and April of 2019. And then you guys can probably imagine that my post and my release stuff was a little bit affected by COVID, but it took about 1.5 years to get the final product done. And what we have here, now is basically a peep into what happens behind the scenes when you invite somebody into an intimate space. And this is a lot of, because the character, I don't act in it, but the character that's based on me is just like me, a trans gay guy. So he's dating actually primarily cis guys. That's just what he likes. So here's a problem. Say gay cis guys can have some of the highest levels of discrimination against trans people. If you go and watch Disclosure, which you should, you absolutely need to watch Disclosure. It'll change your life. It's 2 hours. It goes by like a flash. It is a very good documentary about transmedia representation. And basically, you're finding that this kind of attitude from trans men that is being pervasive in culture, or about from cis gay men, you can see that that's been starting to happen since Stonewall. There's a schism that happened after Stonewall, because I'm sure you know that the people that were actually in that bar were largely trans women. These bars were underground bars where that's the only place that they could be. You're talking about clothing laws, you could only have one piece of clothing that was from the opposite sex. And so those people were the people that actually fought, that actually pushed those cops out of that bar. Fast forward to the rallies that happened after Stonewall, and you'll see this footage in Disclosure. Sylvia Rivera is a very, very famous trans woman activist, and she's yelling at this group of LGBT people in a huge square in New York City, and saying, "This is how you treat me? You're booing me off stage. You don't want me to speak at this rally." And it was a decision that was like, we're about to get our rights Let's just make it not complicated. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that the trans community itself is not guilty of this, because if you even progress that a few decades further, then you're in a place where, okay, well, we have trans people that are transitioning from female to male and male to female. There's some other people that are chatting around here about things that aren't as clear cut as that. Let's just present this first part to society. And that is why you have an explosion of non-binary characters in media right now, not because non-binary people didn't exist 20 years ago. In fact, if you look back at the LGBT history of Seattle in particular, you'll see that that is where a huge amount of them were. And I knew about that place because my sister was, who's also queer, was hanging around Northampton, Massachusetts, which is another mecca of queerness. So we were talking to those people. We knew about them and we were friends with them, but they just weren't in society's imagination. That's what we usually call it as creatives. People don't think about them as existing at all. That was a very long-winded way to answer that question, but
No, that's interesting. So Bombshell, yeah, I did look it up. Funny enough, the first thing that came up when I Googled it, it came up the UK. So it's definitely in the UK.
Oh, the Amazon UK. Well, yeah, and the UK has some real interest in trans issues.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of programs, so I'm not surprised. I Google it. Sometimes if you Google it, you can find like way down on the 7th Google page, it's, you know, people have translated it and people are talking about it in different languages. So, I mean, the trans community is small, but spread out, and people are looking for that content, you know, and that's also something that I wanted in the comedy space. I don't do documentary or drama, which I think would probably be the two most popular genres in terms of trans issues. My writing partner, Marvel A. Rex, who's another trans creative, we both approach trans cinema, not as a genre, but literally as just the thought of the representation of trans identities across every and any genre. Why would we want to be like, okay, well, Boys Don't Cry, that's a trans film. Trans America, that's a trans film. Because genres come with tropes. And I don't like these tropes. I don't like the fact that I have to kill off my trans person at the end, or have to expose them to huge amounts of humiliation that aren't for shaming the other person, just kind of for saying, oh, that's how it is. In my show, we show that kind of thing, and then we put the camera on the cis person and we ask them, why'd that happen? You know, what's up? And we see what is the actual experience of what's going through their head. And then our trans characters go, well, actually, you're basing that on kind of a fallacy. Let me turn your brain here. And then the cis person goes, oh, okay. And we're working to see that progression on screen, to see what would it be like if cis people had all that information, you know, in kind of an environment where it's like, it's funny and it's palatable. And I'm joking with you, and I'm joking because I'm in a little bit of pain hearing your words, but I'm turning it so that I have the power now, and I'm saying, hey, what you just said, not for nothing, but it sounds like something that would come out of a bad person's mouth, and I don't think you're a bad person, you know. So it's that kind of thing. It's got to be direct.
Roy, did you have something to ask?
Well, I was going to ask, so what's the difference in a director and a producer?
Mhm.
And then what's the process of, so you write this script and then like pitching it, getting it, you know, how does it progress up to getting made?
Right. So basically the difference is, of course, is that in directing, you know, I'm designing the shots and I'm overall curating what the project looks like. And as a writer director, I do that to be able to control that my jokes are being queued up in the right way. Everything that I write is very specific on timing. I really love like old movie humor, and I use that a lot, like rapid talking. I use all that kind of stuff. to sort of make this big thing that only works together if all of the things were as I designed. So I control freak direct. And then when I'm producing, of course, that's basically hiring the people that I know are going to fill out that vision. And because I'm the producer on Bombshell, I got to handpick the people. Obviously, as a director, I'd have say, but to handpick the people that would be working with me creatively. And that's always like a real blessing. And it's also all the logistical crap and the problem managing. And because it was such a small production, I was the only on-set producer. So, you know, despite having to go over here and make sure these actors are ready to do this pivotal scene, I also had to go over here and be like, oh shoot, lunch is late, okay. I have to figure out how to fill that time so that we're not screwed on the other end. In terms of how to get it made, because this was my first project, to be completely honest with you, it's really, really difficult when it's your first thing. And a lot of people who are maybe a hair younger than myself, I won't reveal my age. I'm hoping to take it off IMDb soon to remain a mystery. But why not? I have a pretty youthful face. I'm going to use it. But you know, trying to get something made without huge amounts of connections and stuff is really difficult. So you have to basically figure out what is feasible, because you could take the same script and go, this is how we make it in 3 days, and this is how we make it in 10 days. And those are conversations I've had with independent filmmakers and people who are on major shows, that they will really skimp on the pilot, you know, really try to shave off costs because it's a proof of concept, and people know that. In terms of what we actually did with Bombshell, I got to a place where I was meeting with some trans creatives, but I'm very shy, and I was not taking that extra step. I would turn around and be like, hi, my name is Jonathan, and then just be like, oh, okay, bye. I was very nervous. And part of that is because I gained my confidence from people thinking I'm funny. So there's a step that needs to be taken where I get the joke in through the nervousness, they think I'm funny, and then I'm off to the races. And it took a really long time, and it took a long time personally for me to gain my confidence in terms of my transition, and just being like, I have done the things that I wanted to do, and I can walk like with my shoulders back a little bit in the world. And that just took a little while. So during that process, I really was just meeting with people like that, and kind of asking them tentatively, but not being aggressive like you need to be. And what happened was, I was still putting the my foot on the gas. I was still going, I am having a table read in December because I am shooting in March. And I just kept going forward and just sending out the emails and saying, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And how I did that was, I got, there's 3 different private investors. Those were people that knew me for a very long time. I said, hey, do you believe in me? This is my shot. You know, I can't tell you how hard I worked on this being the script. And as somebody who's written for 28 years, I've been, you can, go back and find my, my first stories as a little kid. I have worked to improve my writing. I was told that I was a good writer for a really long time. I went, yeah, nice. All right. Don't have to do anything about that. And then maybe 6 years ago, I just said, I'm going to go take some classes again. I am going to be the best. So I just went for it. And that was happening too. So I was really, really confident in the script. The actors loved the script. The crew loved the script. I'm gaining confidence. I got a little bit of money. And then I was like, I need about $15K more to be comfortable in this.
Yeah.
and I worked for it. I just got in my car and I did Lyft. Like I have, you know, all these little side jobs. Obviously, as a creative, it's always good to have malleable scheduling part-time jobs. And I've had many, many throughout the years. And this allowed me basically to work during the day, clock into Lyft at night, and then I just drive around for like 10 hours. And I don't think I could do that being somebody in my 30s now. Like I think that I actually could not bounce back from the amount of energy I was exporting from my body. But I am so glad that I did that, because it really was evidence of how much I wanted to get that made and how perfect I wanted everything to be. So that's how I got that made. Now that I have a produced and distributed work, everybody wants to talk to me, which is really nice. But
Yeah,
it's
you
like,
got your foot in the door now, so to speak. Yeah.
it's a very expensive ticket.
It's kind of like being 16 years old and trying to find a job, and they go, well, if you had experience, I could hire you.
Yeah,
Well, if nobody hires me, how am I going to get experience, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not the Industrial Revolution. You're not starting work when you're 5. It's kind of a weird thing in Hollywood where, yeah, also you can't pitch unless you have pitched before. What? So that's what has happened though now, that I can't really announce anything today on the program, but my projects that are upcoming with Marvel, AREX, have legs and are gonna hopefully have much bigger budgets than Bombshell, and will hopefully be coming probably next year. So I know that's very vague, but in terms of proof of concept of me as a writer, that's Bombshell. So now people can just throw that on and go, this guy can write a joke, and he knows what it's going to look like after it's produced.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
right.
We are at the top of the hour, but I just wanted to say something really quickly that my girlfriend was saying. And she says, you know, she says, what a great thing it comes into, you know, you've got transcribe, transport, she goes, it's all over the place. She really just noticed it after she transitioned. She goes, everything we say starts with trans, like a lot of words too.
And
So,
you as a cis person don't know this at all probably, but that's a thing in the trans community where we take pictures of those things and we post them on Instagram. That's an actual thing, yeah, because it's fun.
well, she just brought that, so she's new, like I said, 3 years in, and I thought, you know, and then now I notice it everywhere. Whenever there's a trans, I think of Laura, and I go, hey, there's another one. I call her up, like, hey, I got a new one. So.
It's the universe speaking to you. It's the universe saying, you know, because as you may know, it's just American culture that really kind of kicks the shit out of us. We actually have been here for millennia, and many cultures thought we were divine. So, you know, we do really believe that the universe is speaking to us in a lot of ways and is using us because we're the strongest, and we will teach everybody to be kinder.
That's definitely nice. So where can people find you, Jonathan? Please do your spiel.
Please find us. Well, primarily I would say at Bombshell, the series on Instagram. If you go there, you'll be able to follow through the link tree, and that has every single link that you could want about watching and purchasing the series. I will say that if you want to see trans masculine stories on major networks, and I want everybody who's listening right now to think up and try to name more than 3 trans man characters that they can think about on network television. And if you can't, and if you want to see more, then you have to go and watch these shows, because what it does is people like me have made these shows and we pitch to major networks. And when we pitch, we like to say, we got a huge response from cis people. We got comments in our comment section from cis people that said, I love this, I learned, I laughed. And that really helps us. So you can find us at Bombshell, the series. And then I am a writer, director, a profile is at Heath and Henshaw. Heath like the Heath Bar, and Henshaw. Those are the streets I grew up on. But yeah, you can find me there, and you can follow me, and you can see all of my super queer work and my increasingly queer IMDb. Check it all out and follow us there, and interact with us. We actually really want to hear more responses about the show, and we want people to follow because our work coming up is so cool. So anyway, that's where you can find me. I want to thank both of you. You really were amazing hosts today.
Oh, thank you. You're
for being
wonderful.
with us.
Yeah, lots of interesting information, and I do hope, listeners, that you do learn from this, because I think that education is everything. Ignorance is what makes it more difficult, but if you're educated and you understand, and the biggest thing, no matter who you are, we are people. Look inside, and that's the most important thing. If you're happy, that's all that matters.
Happy and not hurting anyone. That's what I always say.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
It's a pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit us at lifterstory.com.